You've been selected by Nintendo for a once-in-a-lifetime international Mario Party tournament. The tournament is played online with no direct communication between players. You're told that the last two players standing will have a chance at cash prizes in a final one-on-one game. After battling through the elite competition, just two players remain. You and a single opponent who you haven't played before and will never interact with again. You now have a chance to win prize money. For every star you collect in the final game, you will win $100,000. At last, you are presented with the finale, a secret level consisting of a single challenge. You are immediately greeted by King Boo, who gives each of you 2 stars to start the game. Your eyes see dollar signs. 2 stars means $200,000, if you can hold on to them. He then presents you with the biggest decision you'll ever have to make in your entire lives. Option 1, attempt to shake your opponent's hand. Or, Option 2, steal your opponent's stars, for a small fee. If you both shake hands, you will each walk away with the 2 stars you have right now. Stealing will get you 2 of your opponent's stars, but you'll then have to give 1 star to Boo as a payment for his services. That means that if you both steal from each other, you will each lose 1 star. Then again, if either of you can manage to steal while the other goes for the handshake, then the thief will end up with an extra star, while the shaker will have lost both. You won't know your opponent's decision until both of you have selected an option. You try desperately to communicate with your opponent, but all you can do is make your choice. You have only seconds left. It all comes down to this. What do you do? According to game theory, you should always steal in this situation. This is a classic example of what's known as the prisoner's dilemma. To see why, let's break down each outcome the game could have. First, remember that Boo gives each of you 2 stars before you have to make your decision. Let's say your opponent went for the handshake. If you had also gone for the handshake, you'd leave with 2 stars. But if you had gone for the steal, you'd leave with 3 stars, which is even better. What if your opponent had gone for the steal instead? In that case, if you went for the handshake, you'd leave with 0 stars. But if you had also gone for the steal, you'd leave with 1 star, which is at least better than none. It may seem like a dilemma, since both of you shaking is better than both of you stealing, but remember that you won't know your opponent's decision until you've both selected an option. From a self-interested perspective, whether your opponent chooses to shake hands or chooses to steal, you will always have a better outcome by stealing, and the same is true for them. Rather than shaking hands or stealing stars in Mario Party, the original version featured 2 prisoners who had to decide between cooperating with or betraying the other for a smaller prison sentence. To be a true prisoner's dilemma, the payoffs need to follow the condition you can see here at the bottom. Beyond this condition, there are a couple of assumptions. The first is that this is a one-time interaction, and there won't be a chance for payback in the future. The second is that there's no ability for the 2 players to communicate with each other. Under these assumptions, your optimal strategy is always betrayal, and this is true regardless of your opponent's strategy. But betrayal is not always your best bet when you have more than one interaction. Let's see what happens when 2 players have multiple dilemmas. So far, we've only discussed the one-time prisoner's dilemma, where there's only a single decision to make and there isn't any opportunity for retribution in the future. You might get the impression from what we've discussed so far that you should be as ruthless as possible whenever you're faced with a prisoner's dilemma decision. But this is far from the case. When you have multiple rounds of prisoner's dilemma decisions and your opponent remembers what you've done in previous rounds, the entire situation changes. These types of situations have been studied extensively in what's known as the Iterated prisoner's dilemma. In the Iterated version, players typically go against many other players, each with their own strategy. With every player they face, they have some unknown number of opportunities to cooperate with or betray them, and try to accumulate as many points as possible. When this happens, the optimal strategy that maximizes your points is dependent on the makeup of your opponent's strategies. Let's take a look at some basic strategies to get a feel for this. For these examples, we'll use the payoff matrix you see here. Our first strategy is always cooperate, which, like the name implies, cooperates every time no matter what their opponent does. Next up, we have always betray, which does the opposite, betraying every time instead. Finally, we have tit for tat, a more dynamic strategy that will start out cooperating but will betray if their opponent betrayed them in the previous round. Always cooperate and tit for tat are both cooperative strategies, and any combination of the two will result in both players cooperating every round. The difference is when they go up against an always betray. Unable to retaliate, always cooperate will be exploited every time, whereas tit for tat will fight back after the first round. This both defends it from further losses and prevents always betray from racking up the score. And then we have two always betrays against each other. This will result in a stalemate, as both players betray unconditionally, even though they would have gained more points through cooperation. The top strategy depends on how many players of each type are participating, but with a mixed bag, always cooperate usually does the worst of the three. Being able to cooperate with other cooperative players, but also defend itself against betrayers, tit for tat is among the more versatile and robust strategies. In fact, in the first ever organized tournament of iterated Prisoner's Dilemma strategies, tit for tat won the contest in the form of an algorithm that contained only 4 lines of code. That said, while it often does pretty well in a large number of environments, it won't always do the best. Not only will betraying strategies get the upper hand in certain situations, but as you can imagine, more advanced strategies have also been created. We've only considered 3 very simplistic strategies you might implement in the iterated Prisoner's Dilemma, but many more strategies have been tested. Here you can see a list of other strategies people have implemented, including a number of variations on tit for tat, as well as another relatively robust strategy known as Pavlov. If you're interested in seeing how different strategies perform against each other, and playing with the variables yourself, I highly recommend you check out the online demo of The Evolution of Trust by Nikki Case. Links to both are in the description below. So, is the Prisoner's Dilemma relevant at all to a real Mario Party game? First, I should say that the majority of your success in real Mario Party games will be from your skill and luck in the various mini-games and familiarity with the maps, which are not related to the Prisoner's Dilemma. But a fraction of your success will also depend on who you choose to steal from or otherwise screw over for personal gain, and how they retaliate to these friendship-ending attacks. You'll end up getting Prisoner's Dilemma-like situations when 2 players have a chance to steal or use the same item within the same turn. For example, in Mario Party 3, you get a Bowser suit for 10 coins. The Bowser suit allows you to steal 20 coins from any opponent you pass while you wear it. When 2 players are close to each other on the map and they both have the suit, we have the familiar dilemma. If they both use the suit, then they'll both be wasting it, stealing 20 coins from each other. In that case, they'd have been better off saving the suit for later. But if one of them can manage to use it on their opponent without the other doing so to them, then they'll get 20 coins at the expense of their opponent using the suit in the process. If we convert the Bowser suit to the going rate of 10 coins, then we get this payoff matrix, satisfying the condition for a Prisoner's Dilemma. A similar situation arises when 2 players are the only ones with stars, and both will be passing Boo for a chance to steal a star by giving Boo coins. The main difference with these situations in the previous examples in this video is that one player will get the opportunity to steal before the other player, rather than them doing so simultaneously. But you might not be surprised to hear that this kind of situation has also been studied with a variant of the iterated Prisoner's Dilemma, sometimes referred to as the alternating Prisoner's Dilemma. There's also the communication factor. You most certainly can communicate with other players if they're right there on the couch with you. But in order for communication to be meaningful at all relies on trust between players, which depending on your friends might be in short supply, with that sweet Mario Party glory hanging in the balance. No trust between players is equivalent to no communication. So, should you steal from other players, or let your mini-game skills do the talking? Even from a purely self-interested perspective, that depends. If you are at the end of a game with a one-time opponent you'll never see again, you might very well maximize your points in that game with a steal. But if you play with certain players repeatedly over many games, then you might want to consider a more cooperative approach, where you can both increase your average scores per game. Just don't be a non-retaliating strategy, like always cooperate. Unless of course you're just so good at Mario Party that you can rub it in your friends' faces that much more by beating them peacefully.